Well, today we're in Lockerbie, a town I know well. I grew up not far from here. Lockerbie, of course, is known for the tragedy of the air crash on the town some 30 years ago. But I want to talk today about another tragedy, a tragedy that happened in Lockerbie in 1593. Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon often talk about a battle that happened in 1314, the Battle of Bannockburn. The Battle of Dryfe Sands that took place just outside Lockerbie is actually far more relevant to the situation that we face in Scotland today. It was all about a family feud between the Johnstons and the Maxwells. And it's a metaphor for the divided society that we have in Scotland today. 700 people were killed in that battle between two families. Just think of that. It makes the massacre of Glencoe between the Campbells massacring the MacDonalds seem like a Sunday school picnic by comparison. It all started with the theft of a horse. It got so bad that the Johnsons piled a whole lot of, the Maxwells piled a whole lot of Johnsons into a church in Lochmaben just up the road and set fire to it and burnt alive all the people inside. So the Battle of Dryfe Sands was 700 people were killed. The streets of Lockerbie were running red with blood. And the captain of the Maxwells, Lord Maxwell, was thrown off his horse, had his arm chopped off while he was still alive. And then a contemporary report said that he had his brains smashed out by one of the wives of the Johnsons with a bunch of keys. Now, why is this relevant today? Why am I standing in Lockerbie on a Thursday afternoon giving you a history lesson? Well, first, because as I say, it is a metaphor for the divided society that we're living in today because of the toxic SNP neverendum. On my way here, I saw a few SNP stickers in windows, posters in windows. I didn't see any for any other party. You know why that is? It's not because nobody's going to vote for other parties. It's because they know that they may get their windows smashed by the SNP followers. The other reason for talking about it is because all of that happened, the bad times, the times of the border reivers, because of the border. The border not very far from here. I'm standing outside Lockerbie Station. The people of Lockerbie, many of them go to Carlisle from here to work each day, to go to school. None of that was possible then. There was a hard border between Scotland and England. And a hard Skexit would put a hard border again between our two nations, potentially. The other thing about a border is I know a lot about borders. When I was in the army, I served in bandit country in South Armagh. Borders do bad things to people. It produces crime, smuggling, and from that you get the sort of lawlessness that they saw at the Battle of Dryfe Sands all those years ago. All that those bad times disappeared with the Union of the Crowns in 1603. It's a matter of historical fact that once the border went, peace was restored to the south of Scotland. The other thing about a border and about Lockerbie is that this is a market town, effectively. It's got an abattoir just down the road there where I've often brought cattle to be slaughtered. The big employer around here is the cheese factory just up the road where the milk from my farm comes to be made into cheese. What would happen to agriculture if we separated from the rest of the UK? 70% of our farm produce ends up going south to English supermarkets. What would happen to our subsidies on which many marginal farmers on marginal land need to survive? Who would pay those subsidies? Would the Scottish taxpayer really be able to generate enough money to carry on paying those subsidies? Would we get back into Europe? If we do, is it really going to be much help if we're outside the internal market of the UK? So that's why I'm standing for All for Unity. I don't want to see the south of Scotland carry on with the type of division, the kind of politics of grudge and grievance that we're seeing at the moment. And I don't want my farm to be separated from its core market in the rest of the UK. So that's why I'm asking you to help me stop separation, even stop this threat of separation and the never-endum, which is causing all the divisions in our society. So I want you to do two things. The first thing is to go online and find our unity pledge and find the petition that asks the government to bring in a Canada-style Clarity Act that would stop the never-endum in its tracks. And the second thing is to vote for a strong voice from me and from George Galloway in Holyrood on the 6th of May by giving your first vote on the lilac ballot paper to the party best placed to beat the SNP, and on the peach-coloured ballot paper, the orange ballot paper, find All for Unity near the top of the piece of paper. You'll see our Spitfire roundel symbol and vote All for Unity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie Blackett, for that mesmerizing tale, actually, about that 16th century battle that took place just outside Lockerbie, and the idea that beautiful Loch Maben, through which I have just traveled, was the scene of such horror, chills the blood. And of course, one cannot be in Lockerbie without a momentary shiver about the horrific crime of international terrorism that took place here in December of 1988. The scourge of terrorism is one of the issues that I intend to deal with today. When the British people were asked whether to leave the European Union in 2016, one of the arguments, a good argument actually, although I did not ultimately find it persuasive, for not leaving the European Union was the disruption that it would cause to the fight against international terrorism, the importance of pooling intelligence and information, and the ability to act through police forces and ultimately the armed forces against existential threats to our people was a strong argument against leaving the European Union. And if that was a strong argument there and then, it is a strong argument now, here, when considering the possibility of the breakup of Britain, a subject to which I shall return. The motto of Lockerbie is forward, and forward is the direction in which we want to travel. Not backwards, not centuries backwards, not 7 centuries backwards, infatuating about a battle that took place more than 700 years ago between two French-speaking kings with Scottish people fighting on either side. We want to go forward to more significant and important battles. The battle against substandard education in Scotland, the battle against child poverty in Scotland, the battle against the disfiguring impact of now more than 14 years of nationalist hatred and division, what Jamie Blackett called the never-endum. We want to take Scotland forward. We want to move our people forward as part of a better Britain and producing a better Scotland. Before I move back to the issues of defense and security and intelligence, let me just say this. Here in this market town, the announcement made by Nicola Sturgeon yesterday that English visitors coming to Scotland should not enter our cafes and our pubs is one of the most shocking statements I have ever heard from any Scottish politician in a long lifetime in Scottish politics. It is arguably an unlawful statement. It is certainly a bigoted piece of nationalistic hatred which disfigures our country. It is a death blow to our tourism and hospitality industries, because who now in England is going to come here when the First Minister of the country herself has told them that they are not welcome in our cafes and in our pubs? Substitute the word English for anything else that you like. Black people, Jewish people, Irish people, Muslim people. Don't go into our cafes. Don't go into our restaurants. Don't go into our pubs. Just think about that. And think about what Jamie said about our Spitfire-style roundel, which we chose carefully. The breakup of our country would desecrate the service and the sacrifice of 15 generations of our men, and in later years also our women, who fought under these colors, who defended our country under these colors, who were sometimes sent into wars they shouldn't have been under these colors. Think of the disrespect that that represents, the ripping up of the Scottish martial tradition within the British Armed Forces. Think what it means for a Scotland separated from the rest of the UK, which will have no army, no air force, no navy. Scotland is a country with 4,000 miles of coastline without a navy. And don't tell me that we'll build a navy. We can't even build 2 ferries at the cost of hundreds of millions of pounds, years behind schedule. And we don't have the money to build a navy, to build an air force, to build an army, to build embassies around the world, to staff them with trained diplomats. This whole idea is nonsense, but it is a dangerous nonsense. But that's not the only thing. You might say I'm being sentimental about the Scottish soldier who wandered far away. You may say that, and you may be right. But the reason why the Hitlerites in 1934 were hand in glove with the founders of the Scottish National Party was not because they loved haggis or tartan or loved the leaders of the SNP, but because they knew that if they could find collaborators here in Scotland, they could fashion a spear that they could plunge into the back of the rest of the United Kingdom. That's why Hitler's emissaries were in endless discussions with the founders of the SNP, the fraud MacDermid from Langham, who said in writing, in a poem, "London is burning. I don't care." How can anyone want anything to do with a movement founded by people like that? Arthur Donaldson, whom the SNP still annually commemorate, was interned during the war as a security risk because of his long record of intriguing with and collaborating with and preparing to be Scotland's Quisling if the Hitlerites had managed to defeat our Navy, to defeat our Air Force, and cross the Channel. These people, the founders of the SNP, were ready to establish a Quisling state in Scotland, the better to destroy the determination to fight on of the rest of the people in these islands. Now, again, you may say, well, that was long ago. Well, I was born just 9 years after the Second World War, so it's not as long ago for me as perhaps it is for you. But let me acknowledge that it's long ago, and that the SNP now are not Hitlerite or fascist. I'm not saying that. Although their dangerous nationalism sometimes sails pretty close to the wind. But what would Scotland become if it now broke away from the rest of the United Kingdom, but a security risk to the rest of the United Kingdom? It's obvious. A vast country with very few people, with 4,000 miles of coastline, plenty of places to hide. If Sturgeon had her way in the European Union, freedom of movement of people, people coming from everywhere in the world to England, most of them not because of the undoubted delights of Ecclefechan, but as a means thereafter of reaching England. How many amongst those might be a security risk to our own people or to our brothers and sisters in the south? That's a clear and present danger to national security right now, never mind in the 1930s. Never mind the horror story that Jamie told you about what life was like here in the south of Scotland for centuries when lawlessness and murder prevailed. We have a good country. It is a Great Britain. And it is at a great price, especially for us. Talk about a good deal. We get more than £1,900 each extra in Scotland from the Barnett formula. £1,900 per head per year, more than the people just a few miles from here in Carlisle get from the taxpayer. How's that for a great price? And that, of course, does not take into account the billions of pounds that were sent from the Treasury in COVID relief, in business support, to try and help our people, one country, through the horrors of the last 15 or 16 months. A lot of which has gone unaccounted for, by the way. some of which has been misappropriated, by the way, and some of which is currently being showered in the offer of a free bike. A free bike, but only if you vote SNP. That's not much of a price. We're going to break up a country of more than 300 years for a bike, for a laptop that was promised last year during the lockdown and not delivered. Who knows if you'll ever see a bike? Who knows if you'll ever see a laptop? But even if you did, it wouldn't be much of a bargain. It wouldn't be much of a bargain to break up Britain for the price of what would undoubtedly be a shoddy bike. A bike on which you couldn't go to the libraries that are closing down. A bike that you couldn't use to go to your work, which is closed and may never reopen. A bike to go to a school that is now performing so badly that when the OECD, imagine an international inquiry into our schools, of which we were once so proud, has produced a report so horrific that the SNP government has locked it up until conveniently after the election. A bike to go and visit your granny in a care home where the SNP actions killed thousands of our grandparents during this coronavirus crisis. They now call it a mistake. I call it a crime for which those responsible must be held accountable. So, as I've said many times before, in 1940 and 1941, when the SNP were intriguing with the Nazis, the young men, average age 20 years old, with a life expectancy measured in weeks, were flying overhead with a roundel that looked much like this. Nobody here looked up at them and wondered whether they were from Sutherland or Sunderland or Suffolk. All that mattered was that they were here to defend us, to save us, to save our island, our country. And we are asking you to save our country once again on the 6th of May by voting for the best placed pro-Britain candidate. Whether it's Conservative or Labour or Liberal, we don't care. Whoever is the best placed to beat the SNP on the purple ballot paper, vote for them, even if you don't like them, even if you don't like their party. I'm voting for a Conservative whom I don't like and whose party I like even less, because it's him or the SNP. The Tories are for Christmas. Separatism is forever. Go forward on the 6th of May by voting on the purple ballot paper for the best placed candidate to defeat the SNP. But if you want to super glue the union, if you want to double lock Great Britain, then the best choice for you, all over Scotland, on the orange ballot paper, the peach-coloured ballot paper, is to vote for All for Unity. We are third top of that ballot paper, right at the top of a very long page. Look for that symbol. Look for our name. All for Unity. Save our Scotland. Save Britain on the 6th of May. Thank you very much for listening.
Very good. Very good.